A chef isn't just a chef in aged care anymore. They're doing compliance work. They're a part of the team. They're out in front of the customers or the residents. They're speaking to the residents. They're running food-focused meetings.
Hey, everybody. You're with Dani Valent and you're listening to Dirty Linen. Thank you so much for being with me. Always happy to sit in this chair, pull this microphone up towards my mouth and, just learn from somebody who is as obsessed with food and hospitality as I am. It's always a privilege to chat to a guest and to know that you are there with us, giving us your time. There are so many things you could be doing. You're listening to me. Come on. I am so grateful. If you love the show, give it 5 stars. Tell your friends. More listeners is always fun. We love more people joining the Dirty Linen party. All right. Today, I'm really looking forward to today's chat. If we're lucky, we'll get old. If we're lucky, we'll still be eating food we enjoy that also nourishes us. But if we end up in aged care, as many of us will, what are the meals going to be like? I can't imagine becoming any less obsessed with food as I age, and I can only imagine the mental and physical impacts, the deep sadness and frustration if I don't like my dinner. Today's guest is David Martin, the Executive Chef, Manager and Hotel Services Manager at St Vincent's Care, which offers retirement living, home care and aged care in Victoria and New South Wales. David is a leader in meal service innovation in aged care. With decades of experience, he also cooks in competitions and is in the top 24 chefs soon to compete at the National Chef of the Year comp at Food and Hospitality Week 2026, coming up in late May at ICC Sydney. David, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on today.
It's great to have you on the show. Tell us a bit about what's brought you to aged care. Such an important, so many people are eating the food that's created for an aged care setting, but we don't hear much about it. Tell me what's taken you to this place.
Look, Dani, when I came into aged care over 10 years ago now, aged care is not what it used to be. A lot of misconceptions and preconceptions beforehand. A lot of my chef friends that when I went into the aged care industry thought I was actually crazy for going into aged care, thinking that I've lost my mind or I'm gone to retire in an aged care home and clock in and clock out, and that's really what they thought. But what brought me to aged care was a longing and a calling. I was working in high-end hotels and fine dining restaurants for over 10 years, and going through that grind, as you all know, can be very, very daunting and also taxing on not only the body but also the mind. And I got to a stage in my career where I wanted to affect change, and I wanted to ensure that whatever I do and whatever I go, wherever I go, was obviously able to continue to push the boundary and really push the bubble. And I was getting to a point where I was actually burning out, after long hours, tolls on the body. As you know, it's a lot. Hospitality back then is a lot different now to what it was. I remember vividly when I was speaking to my parents, I said, "Look, Mum, I might, and Dad, I might leave the industry because I'm just fully burnt out." And he goes, "Oh, we've got a cousin who works in aged care. Why don't you try aged care?" And I said, "Look, it's not really my thing, but you know what? I'll give it a go." So I walked into aged care not knowing what truly aged care was like. But when you slowly pulled back, the layers and really got to know the industry and the sector, I could see that there was a longing for people to help the industry and a chance to really make big change within the sector. But most importantly, I could see the connection between residents and families. And I think, that connection is a big part that even in hospitality, you make a connection with your customers. But when you make a connection with a resident or a family, it's a deep connection. It's like you're a part of their family. It's a part of their fabric and a part of their care journey, and it was really entrancing to see where, food plays such an more important part. And you could see the food have, a, a medication type effect to really soothe the soul and soothe the pains and aches, but really uplift the mood. And I thought, it was just an opportunity where I could really make the better. And 10 years on, I look back and I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I was being blessed with, but, the opportunities that I always get to speak about this great industry and why everyone who's listening and everyone who I speak to has an invested stake in this sector, no matter what it is. And I think we'll get into that a little bit more.
Wow, it's really profound. Tell me about, you've been in the sector for a while now. Like, what are some of the things that a chef working in this industry has to consider? As you say, it's hospitality, it's about food, it's about connection. But what are some of the different things that you need to consider from a restaurant or hotel setting?
Well, as we all know, like chefs aren't really, they're really driven by passion and innovation and being a part. What sets apart of aged care and hospitality, you can really translate your skill sets that you learn in hospitality into an aged care setting. Aged care has gone through a transformation, and it's moving towards more of a consumer focus, care. So everything that we do is based around understanding who the person is and person-centered care. And as you all know, chefs and hospitality, people are really consumer focused, because that's what we do, right? It's always serving the customer. So you're able to showcase your skills within aged care and really push that boundaries. And I think we're in a stage where everyone can leave their mark within the sector, no matter how big or small that you're doing or how big the effect of the change is. And I think one of the biggest draw cards is that you have effect and change. You can see that cause and effect when you're working in aged care. You can see, okay, well, you have direct line with your customers, or your residents, as we call them in aged care, and you're able to showcase your skills. The residents that are moving into aged care now are completely different to what aged care was before. So the baby boomers are slowly moving in, so their requirements are changing, and they're worldly travelled. So chefs that have multiple disciplinary cuisines are able to showcase what they've learned across the board. Their palate has changed. They're not looking for just, your meat and 3 veg. They want something that's innovative. They want something that's exciting, that's something new. But also really appreciate, the skill set that you've actually learned over the time. A chef isn't just a chef in aged care anymore. They're doing compliance work. They're a part of the team. They're out in front of the customers or the residents. They're speaking to the residents. They're running food-focused meetings, and they're really, creating a network within that home or within that network. So, they're a big vocal point, and they can be based around. So, and we're only at, the beginning of the growth of aged care. So, the next 10 to 15 years or 5 to 10 years is going to be a massive boom within aged care, because Australia has an aging population.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important field. But I think, I'd love you to get a bit more detailed. What happens in these kitchens? What is the food that gets put on the plate? How do you make sure it's culturally appropriate, that it's exciting, that it's nourishing, that it accounts for, someone who's not able to chew food in the way that they once were? Really just take us in there. What are you doing in there?
Yeah, so the development of the menu, or the development of the dishes that we serve, is always based around the clientele that we're serving for that home. So at the start, we're obviously looking at trying to develop the menu based around the wants and dislikes of our residents and what are the current trends, seasonal trends as well, whether if it's food that are that is obviously to season, so whatever is best in season. But we develop our menus by understanding and speaking to our residents and understanding their needs and wants. We do a lot of food-focused meetings, which is food dedicated around food. So we do a lot of food tasting. So, a lot of the things that we would showcase is things that are coming on the menu. So, for example, we're heading towards winter. We do a lot of stews, a lot of braises like, confits. So we have duck, braised ribs, lamb cutlets on the menu. We do a lot of seafood, in the summertime, for example, we work with our fishmonger and see what the best of the catch of the day is and work with what the best bycatch and catch to try and have that sustainability piece as well. We work with our vegetable supplier to understand what the current layout of the land, what's fresh and what's vibrant at the moment, and gear our pastry or gear our desserts around, figs, for example. When fig season comes in, we have a lot of figs coming through, asparagus season, asparagus showcasing what we're doing and what we're seeing. And, it's really innovative where a chef can showcase the ingredients for the day and what we're doing, and so it's very vital that we're able to, showcase that in a way where food focus approach is very important. So, yeah, and the chefs can try different things where the food is might not work before, but change the actual recipe and see where it comes out, and we're able to do a little bit of changes. So, and you know what, and I think we'll get into a little bit about it, but we often showcase some of our dishes that we serve to our residents on the competition scene, when we compete, so they can see a bit about what we're doing, what we're showcasing, what aged care food is like. And most importantly, we work very closely with the dietitians, the speech pathologist, to make sure that the recipe or the menu is nutritionally balanced, but also more importantly, when a resident has swallowing difficulties and we have to modify their food, we're able to work with certain providers that pre-produce texture modified food such as smooth dining, but also modify food on site to be able to meet the residents' needs, which is a completely an innovative technique moving forward, because the quality or the quality of food should continue on no matter what texture or what diet that you have, which is the challenge within aged care currently, because they're facing different time constraints, but we're working towards where we're able to continuously have that harmonious feel across the menus no matter what diet you have.
I mean, David, some of this food just sounds so good, like seasonal vegetables, figs, seafood, like it's duck. Come on, like it sounds really great. I'm looking forward to moving in. But I feel like is this a really high end facility that you're working with? Like from studies that I've seen, about a third of facilities spend less than $10 per day on food for aged care residents. So are there a lot of inequalities within this system and the ways that different people are being fed?
Yeah, no, look, that's a very, very, very good question. We do have a flagship home, and we talk about Q as being a flagship home where we serve a lot of the premium options. But when we came on the journey, being a part of St. Vincent's and St. Vincent's Care, we are a non-profit organisation, but we're a Catholic organisation as well. So the very important thing that we always strive for and what we push for is equality across multiple homes. So when we did that within Victoria, the very essence was we wanted to make sure we trained our chefs at Q, understood the concept, understood the vision, the values, the ethos, and then move across multiple homes no matter what the delivery point is. So a lot of our chefs trained at Q but went on to our other homes, ensuring that the quality care and the quality of food is consistent across the board. And the core of the fact of the matter that we want to try and do is cause and effect of the residents that we serve and the patients that we serve. So no matter where you go, the best or what you eat, we're trying to strive for excellence in that space. So our homes that from Q, the same thing in a different space, in a different presentation, and different ingredients could be also made at Eltham or Werribee, etc. Because the core of the fact is that we want to have a quality and consistent consistency across ultimately all of our operations.
Do you think it's possible to feed someone with dignity and excitement at around $10 a day?
Look, I think there's been a lot of work within the aged care sector, especially after the reforms and after the aged care Royal Commission, and $10, is very, very difficult these days. And this is obviously speaking above and outside of St. Vincent's care, but we invest heavily in our food and our healthcare, and innovation and change is moving towards that, and demands change as well, and requirements change. So a lot of homes have actually moved away from that $10 industry standard and is moving towards $15 to $20 plus more. St. Vincent's Care Q being the outliner, because and it's very important to note that anything that we do now when in regards to financial in regards to food, we have to report that every quarter to the government. So we actually are liable about where our consistency is, and if it's too low, as a sector, then there is mechanisms where they will trigger an audit or an investigation on why it's too low. But most of the industry in itself, Dani, has moved towards more of a $15 to $20 market with great haste to try and ensure that we're meeting the new standards, and Standard 6 and more in particular, which is around food and hydration, which is what we're governed by. So it is something that in the past was industry standard, but not now moving forward with the new standards and the requirements.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, to be honest, I hadn't really thought about, we know cost of goods is going up, not just in hospitality, but across the economy. Of course, power prices, fuel, insurance, all those on costs that businesses are subject to. I hadn't really considered that, how that might impact aged care, where I'm assuming a lot of the incomes are stay quite fixed, and then the costs go up. It must be a real challenge. Of course, that's not just in aged care, that's everywhere, but just that responsibility where someone doesn't have a choice whether they're eating with you or not. It's a really interesting industry. Just for people who are listening, we've got another chat on the podcast with Katie Gett from the Staple Store, and one of her focuses is around eating really well on a budget. And I think, she speaks to, and David also, of course, speaking to this idea that it's not just about premium ingredients and spending more. Sometimes it's about cooking cleverly, or, so many of the most nutritious foods are actually some of the cheapest. It's not all about putting a sprinkle of caviar on top of something and, that's not what necessarily makes a meal good. Well, actually, it's certainly not what makes a meal good. David, I'd love you to talk about, the satisfaction that you're getting from this work. You mentioned a bit of burnout and just that grind of working in the traditional hospitality setting. Tell me about, some of the transformations you've seen among your clients there, or, the personal satisfaction of working in this setting.
Yeah, so let's take a scope back and then a bit of a frame back to have a look at its entirety. I very realized early on while working in this sector that I am about one man, so I needed to try and get a team around me that was able to have the same vision and the values and then the investment. So when I came on the journey with St. Vincent's, I really stipulated that we need to get the right mindset, the right ethos, the right vision to help drive what we're trying to achieve. So we started with our people and making sure that we had the right chefs and the right kitchen hands, the right FSA, the food service staff, which at the time, a lot of that was around, it was pre-pandemic itself. So a lot of people were out of work. So we were able to, bring them on the journey. And so, once we started to, have a cause and effect and really showcase what we're trying to do, and it wasn't just about the recipes and the thing. It's really about, that relationships that we build with our residents, and seeing their faces light up during mealtime, or, when they walk into the dining room, or when you're walking down the hall, they pull you up and say, hey, that meal was amazing. And I can give you a couple examples. There's two big examples in my career that I could talk about, that I really speak about cause and effect and what we're trying to do here. There was, we in a queue, we're dealing with a palliation ward, which is end of life care, and we launched, and one of the things that we try and do is maintain, obviously, a bit of continuance across the aged care side and the pal care side at Q. And for birthdays, we normally send out a personal birthday cake, little cake with the name "Happy Birthday." And we send it out. So we do that for the PAL care side. And there was this one resident who was obviously pretty sick and towards his end of his time. And we sent him a cake, and he sent back a message with the nurses, and he delivered it on a piece of note. He said, "Thank you so much. This brought so much tears to my eye, because it was the first time that I received a cake with a message like that." And you don't realize the cause and effect and this is why I speak to about this, the chefs, is that, you think about food as, okay, this is my role, I'm just cooking, but realistically, the meals that we're serving, especially around the PAL care side, this could be their last meal that they ever eat. How do you want to be remembered by? How do you want to leave an impression, not just for the patient or the resident that you're dealing with, but the family members that are along that journey with them? Because a lot of the feedback that we get, and a lot of the communication we get, it's not about the food, it's about the journey that you had, and the care that you gave those family members during that time where they're coming to you for their time of need. And let's say the reason why they're coming to care is because they need our help, and to try and really coast them through and provide comfort and care through that time through food, especially food. Is something that I know myself and my team will last for a lifetime. Accolades and awards and recognition is one thing, and that's not what we do it for. What we do it for is that time where you see it in their eyes, where they're at their most vulnerable, most weak, and you're there to help. And I think that stays and that sticks, and that's what always brings to the cause of my mind is that, what we're doing with and what we're trying to do is really have a cause and effect with the residents. And there was another time that, we recently took over a place at Eltham. We brought it back in-house from external catering, and, it was Mother's Day. It was actually a Mother's Day service. And I remember the fact that I brought my kids with me because I wanted to make sure everything was well. It was a Sunday, so I just wanted to make sure. And I often bring my children, because it's good for them to actually meet the residents and know and have social engagement for the residents. And there was a family member who pulled me up, and she goes to me, and my senior head chef Harry was next to me at the time, and this lady goes to me, she's like, "Oh, is that your kids?" And I'm like, "Yes, this is a parent." And I was like, "Oh no, she's going to grill me. She's going to grill me through my kids, but she said to my children, and she said, your dad is, and your dad, and he called Harry Uncle Harry, because my kids call him Uncle Harry, but he goes, your dad and Uncle Harry are doing amazing work, and the food that they're doing is changing lives, and you should be very proud of what they're doing." And I think, those two encapsulates the real vision and the cause and effect. And I think, yes, I get to speak about my experiences, but I do it because I want to shine a light within aged care, and I want to shine light in the healthcare, because we all have an investment stake in this, because no matter what it is in what age of life, we will always succumb to some type of care. So it's very important that we have an investment stake in this. And I spoke to this in recent supplier events and in recent, public speaking events, is that we all have an investment stake. So what you should do is really push us from behind and help us and coach us through and provide the support that we need, because when it comes to that time when you need our help, we are there. And as you know, food is like that, especially in an aged care setting or a healthcare setting. We do not close 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, nonstop. So we need the support and help that we have. And I think that encompasses a lot of them. So, yeah. And just to see, people reaching out and saying, Chef David, you're inspiring me, keep up the good work. And I said, look, thank you so much. We're all in this together. We're all in the trenches and really helping to push forward. And I think, those words of encouragement, I think that really strives. But, seeing the team around me thrive and grow on their own is the biggest one. And I spoke about that early on. I am but one man, but I see the team behind me, Chef Harry, Richie, Kim, Bianca, Corey, Reddish, all those guys and support, Chef Jesse, they're guys, that, I'm one that, but they push the mission and the values when I'm not there. And that's very important to recognize, is that the people who support you around you when you're not there, that really strive and push that vision. And, I'm grateful. And, St. Vincent's and St. Vincent's Health Australia, who's really invested in that. And yeah, so it's been great.
Wow. Those stories are so just really, just get me right in the heart. Just must be so satisfying and meaningful to create that kind of impact, David. I mean, is there something that you've brought with you, that respect for aged people, respect for elders? Like, is that something that's always been a thread in your life?
Yeah, look, coming from a southeastern Filipino background, respect and culture, and in a lot of cultures is ingrained. But Filipinos are well known for care and care for the elderly across the world and the globe. My parents, really instilled that in with me in a very young age. But I guess in my mind as well, it's like, well, I could see how if the care that I provide is a cause and effect of what I would like my parents and my grandparents would receive. So how would I would like my grandparents and my parents would receive? And I really advocate for greater change, because I know that one day that they will probably be in care, and yeah, respect and understanding has always been a core value within my my ethos. So and that's what I wanted to bring through my food, through the care for the ingredients, the care for the residents, the care for the families, everyone. So and yeah, no matter what time of the day or who I speak to, it's always allowing that time and that 2 minutes to spend with you, or whatever it requires to be able to achieve what we want to achieve.
Let's talk a bit about your competition life, because it does seem like a sort of interesting counterpoint to the work in aged care. So tell us what you're expecting at Food and Hospitality Week, and why is it that you engage in competitions?
So, I started competitions very early on, like in the Golden Chef Hat Awards when I was an apprentice, but I sort of took a hiatus for it, a little bit of time once you start working, and I think the biggest ones were, I used to compete on the barbecue scene, American barbecue, and actually, fun fact, side note, I was actually on a barbecue competition show on Channel 7, mate, with Dipper's Backyard Barbecue Wars, pre-pandemic, actually. But yeah, so, but for me, we've always wanted to ensure that we stay ahead of the game and stay sharp and make sure that our skill set is the best that it can be. And the best way to do that is always to put forward and compete against some of the best, and, the biggest ones that we've ever competed in is around the London Culinary Saloon in London, and we came out of there with 2 silvers and a merit. And we competed at the Australian Culinary Federation as well as a team challenge, where we won 2 golds and a silver. The 2 golds were actually won best dessert, which is crazy to think. And the reason why it's crazy to think, a lot of the components and a lot of the flavor profiles were actually from aged care. So that's why we when I spoke to you about that the things that we like to showcase is around food, around aged care, is to give them an insight of what food is really like in aged care, and they really go, wow, this is not what we expected, and some of the best actually. But more specific around the Australian Chef of the Year, Australian Chef of the Year is a widely recognised competition. And it's an individualized competition, so it's a one-on-one, you against everyone else, which is always intriguing because when you have a team, yeah, okay, you have strengths and weaknesses, so you can really cover each other. But when you're out there by yourself in front of everyone and everyone's watching, that's where where you are. And I think that's what really pushes me to become better and really have that driven sense, because you're not just competing against aged care chefs, you're competing against Australia's best, which is an always go no. But for me though, getting to the top 24 is amazing on its own, but to really showcase food in aged care, I've already won. That's I don't really mind about, okay, if I don't win the final, the gold trophy, but to be there and say, hey, actually, there's someone who's flying the flag for aged care within in healthcare in general, to show other chefs in aged care and in hospitals, wow, we can actually compete it against the best of the best. Why can't I do that? And have a bit of a cause and effect. And what I normally say is, you create a ripple, which hopefully will turn into a wave, so the ability to really put yourself in the line, and you're really putting yourself out there, because it's only you against a timer against four chefs, and I think by that we're able to hone our skills. And I often push a lot of the chefs within aged care onto the spotlight. We had Chef Harry competed 2 years ago at the Australian Chef of the Year by himself as well. And at the Australian Culinary Federation Individual Challenge, I brought some of my head chefs as well to compete, and they won a bronze and a merit as well. And I think it's very important to really bring invested stakes that when they do this competition, it's not just about the competition, it's about the belief in yourself. And say, hey, I can do this. So why can't I do it? I'm able to do this at work. I'm able to do it in front of people, and that really drives their appetite for wanting more, and, becoming more, more driven and more understanding about, what it takes to become at that level. And I guess, they leave there with not only an experience, and that's what it is, an understanding and experience, but it also leaves them with an appetite. I can do better. Let's come back again and do this better. And that's what I like to see. It's not about the mistakes. It's not about, okay, you're not winning, but it's about, understanding, okay, well, if you're coming back and you're putting yourself out there again, coming back the second time, it shows resilience. It shows drive, So I think that's what's really, really innovative about it. But yeah, and I guess it's more about putting aged care and healthcare on the map, and that's what I want to do. And hopefully when I leave and I retire, whenever that it may be, that I look back and say, hey, I somewhat caused a ripple and hopefully turn into a wave. So yeah, competitions has always been a part of our pedigree and a part of our development, our chef development program. And St. Vincent's and St. Vincent's Health Australia has really took that and really supported us with that. Hopefully in the not too distant future that we see other aged care providers and other aged care chefs really push themselves to do that. So, which in turn will result in better food and quality of food for our residents and patients that we serve. So hopefully we see that.
Love it. Well, wish you all the best. I know you've already won, but come on, love to see you in the top 10, maybe with a medal. That would be really awesome. David, you've given us such amazing insights into the sector today, and I'm really grateful for that. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Look, no, I just wanted to say that, thank you for having me on the show and allowing to spread the message. But most importantly, like I said, just really, no matter what it is, yes, really push us forward and really support the aged care industry and the healthcare industry, and lobby to the government around food and food food costs, etc. Because like I said, every part and everything helps, and I think what we can do is really just help each other and really strive forward to a better, fairer and carer sector. And I'm just really proud to really fly the banner for the healthcare and the aged care sector. So thank you so much.
Well, you're certainly doing that, David. Thank you so much for sharing with us today on Dirty Linen. And I'll be keeping an eye on Food and Hospitality Week.
Thank you.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.